Check, test, test. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you. Yes. Hi, I'm Stephen Brown. I'm one of the faculty members in the philosophy department here at the Ohio State University. This is the philosophy and critical thinking summer camp, which has been on hiatus for a couple of years because of this small global disease problem that we were having, or still having. And we were really happy to be back in person again. We have a bit of a smaller group this time around, but we had a good time with them this week. So here's the plan for today. So this week we talked about two big philosophical topics: freedom and flourishing, something like well-being, and the ways that those two concepts interact with each other. So we had some lecturers come in. We had a bunch of activities for them. And the goal for today is for the campers themselves to give a small presentation of some kind. We have pseudo-filtered this. We've given a critique of a first version, but this is a little bit Saturday Night Live-ish. Never quite know what might happen. But so far, your campers have all been very responsible human beings, so we're not too worried. So what we're going to do is we have three groups that are going to go. Then we're going to take a break, and then we'll do two more. So a 5-minute presentation. Then we'll open it up for questions and answers from anybody in the group. And if they feel a little philosophically overwhelmed, some of the staff might jump in and try to provide some kind of insight. But that's not really what we're trying to do. We're trying to let them take their stab at giving some philosophical insight and fielding some philosophical questions. So yes, does that make sense? Lovely. When I will tell the group to come by topic, if you could briefly stand here at the microphone and just say your name to the people in the group. I am this person, I am this person, I am this person, and then do your thing. Does this make sense? Dead silence. Okay. Atomism group, go.
I'm June. I'm Kate.
I'm Finn.
A brief explanation of determinism. Yeah, all right. I'm Al-Ghazali, and I believe that everything is determined and everything is planned by God. I am said God.
I am Sartre, and I do not believe that everything is planned. I am not a determinist, I'm a liberalist, but I also believe in atomism.
So atomism is the belief that all things have been like little indivisible particles, and in between them is like a void of nothing.
But God doesn't exist.
Shit, you're right.
Okay. Yeah. So, okay. So when I talk about liberalism, I'm not talking about libertarian. When I'm talking about libertarianism, I'm not talking about it in a political sense. I'm talking about it in the sense that I have free will. But Al-Ghazali.
We do not have free will. It's all determined by God. Yeah, so this thing between things, you can always find that's not. Yeah. Okay, so atomism is sort of the it's the belief that time is just divided into temporal slices, and with determinism, determinists believe that every slice is pre-laid out by God, and libertarians believe that as you go, time moves with you. So you create every choice you make and the slices are created as you make those choices.
Yeah, so for example, as a libertarian, if I say that I'm walking like this, I am an atomist. So I believe that there are a series of moments there, but I believe that I create those moments, not God.
As a determinist, I believe that God created those moments and I'm just following the plan.
Libertarian is not that. It's really like things are like little individual slices, like frames.
That's atomism.
Yeah, I'm giving you the wrong definition. That you, no, that is wrong. You don't make a mistake.
Okay, well, okay. As a libertarian, I will introduce a couple of the very important philosophical figures who, contributed and believed in atomism, basically. Al-Ghazali was one, of course. René Descartes, Jean-Paul Sartre, Pierre Gassendi, Robert Boyle, and Isaac Newton.
Another one of my beliefs is that God's actions move us from one slice of time to another, meaning that the choices I make are not mine, therefore I should not be punished. But Al-Ghazali kind of did believe, I did believe that God should still be held responsible for the choices these people make, and I should still be punished.
And yeah, I believe in complete free will as Sartre, so that's essentially how it works.
Oh, right. So atomism matters because it's like connected to free will, God, all that good philosophical stuff. So it's really essential to that sort of thinking.
Yeah.
I think it's important to note that there are non-atomists, people who just believe that everything is flow, like me walking along here would not be a series of essentially moments, but just a continuous time. As Sartre did not believe that, though.
Sartre on temporality says we live by scientific time that registered by clocks and calendars and assume that it flows regularly and that events occur within that timeline. So that relates to atomism because that's the atomistic belief that time is in temporal slices.
Confuse you a little bit more. Al-Ghazali believed that God's actions made us from one slice of time to the next. So we were essentially being remade again and again, which is kind of what Sartre believed, but not.
All right, let's call it good for now and get some questions up here. Questions from our audience.
Isn't it, do you think that it is interesting that Ghazali and Sartre, even though they had almost very different views on the world, they still believe in atomism?
Yeah, they just believe, they saw atomism in different ways, as if Sartre believed that you created the temporal slices as you went and time wasn't predetermined, but Ghazali believed that time was predetermined. But yeah, atomism is in both of those.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting because we label them both as atomism and they are similar concepts, but kind of they're different in a way too. It's not the same thing. Yeah, exactly.
Any other questions?
So if there's atomism on this end of the spectrum, what's the, I won't say opposite, but what would be the opposite of atomism?
I don't know that we talked about this particular view. So they talked about there is a view which is kind of this continuous divisibility. These days, that gets called gunk theory. I don't think there's a better word for it. I think it's literally called gunk. Do you have a better word than gunk? Non-atomic. Active. Maybe one more question. Maybe not. Good job, team. All right, we're going to transition to our second team, which is you're talking about More free will stuff, but from a different perspective. Here we go. Did you read that right?
Check. You guys can hear me? Yeah. I'm Colin. My name's on the slide. I'm Ryan. My name is also on the slide. We're going to be discussing: do we have free will, and what are its? All right. So we're going to be discussing: do we have free will, and what are different ways of looking at the question: do we have free will? So,
in this case, we're going to be using the definition that free will is the ability to make individual decisions without any external coercion, because some people may have separate definition. We want to make it clear that this is the definition we are referring to, say free will.
So to illustrate that a little better, if you're in a room and it's kind of like a grocery store and it has infinite boxes of cereal, you can choose what cereal you want to eat for breakfast because they're all there. You can make that choice. That is you exercising your free will. So there is a point of view that is determinism, which is basically there is absolutely no free will. All events are predetermined. Now, audience participation, raise your hands. Don't be shy, raise your hands. All right, so you all either raised your hands or didn't raise your hands, but could you have chosen to do the opposite? If you raise your hand, could you have chosen to not? It seems like the answer would be yes, but could it? Because you can never go back and see if you could have done it or not, right? There's no way to go back and look, well, okay, this time I'm going to do the opposite. Because that already happened. It's a set moment in time, and it can't be changed. So one thing that supports this determinism is known as the Lebet experiment, which was conducted by Benjamin Lebet. And basically, he set people up in a room with sensors attached to their brains that read brain activity, a button that they were told to press whenever they wanted, and something to indicate when they made the decision to press the button. And he found that people their brains started the motion to press the button before they indicated their decision. So basically, your mind is already going to do something, and you saying that you chose to do that is just a rationalization of what you actually did.
Well, that is what it suggests.
That is what this theory suggests. And so Lebet didn't quite go to the extent that some people did with this experiment, saying that we have no free will, all events are predetermined. He suggested the idea of free won't, so we can't stop ourselves from doing something, but that's a more complicated idea that you can research on your own if you want to.
Now, on the opposite of determinism is libertarianism. Libertarianism is the idea that because an agent, for example, a human being, someone of, in this example, because they have free will, their events cannot be predetermined.
And this is not in any way similar to the political ideology.
Yes, that is important to clarify. Now, a reason for something that supports the idea of libertarianism is quantum indeterminacy. Since quantum indeterminacy, you cannot know every state of a particle. It is impossible to know those every states. So it is entirely random what can happen. You know, for example, are we going to say something?
So it's kind of like this. If I drop this pen, it is determined that it will fall to the floor. But human minds and the things that make human decisions, electrons, don't operate similar to that pen. They operate at an entirely different level because of how small they are. And you really can't predict if you set up an electron in a certain way. There's no way that anyone can predict where that electron will go or what it will do next.
If the pen was an electron, for example, if I were to drop it, instead of it could either fall, rise, go to the left, or hit somebody in the head. You know,
You're not going to hit you in the head with a pen.
Yeah.
That's his sister.
Well, this suggests, since there is ultimate randomness to particles of the universe, it suggests the idea that there is no predetermination, and thus suggests free will as well. Now, Q&A. Any questions? Questions? Anybody? No? Oh, wait.
So you've outlined two contrasting positions there, libertarianism and determinism, and you've given us some pros and cons of each of those. So what do each of you lean towards? Does one seem more convincing to you, and if so, why?
I choose to believe in libertarianism because I think it's essentially the human experience that we believe we can choose and affect our own lives.
I agree with Colin for much the similar reasons, and also the fact that it is impossible to see, it is impossible to know where exactly any subatomic particle will go, as a quantity determinacy. Anything else? I'll go over there. Haley, yes.
I was in a question that I think just because you don't know the Bible that necessarily
Oh yeah,
you might not be able to know it, that changes you and
I still hold my beliefs, but you're correct. We do not want to. Our intention with the presentation was not to give, one side's better than the other. We just wanted to present both sides neutrally, so you can form your own opinion.
Sam.
You said that you believe in free will because you think it's essential for the human experience. I'm curious why you say that.
Well, if I didn't believe in free will, if I believed that all events are predetermined, what would stop me from just lying in bed all day and being miserable? I mean, I just don't want to do that, so I choose to believe in free will.
Wouldn't the argument be that it's part of the predetermined path for you to do things today?
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems depressing, and I don't want to feel depressed all the time. Really, this isn't related to like some philosophical understanding or scientific belief. I just don't want to think that someone else has complete total control of it. Dope.
I find that a lot of people who think that humans have free will, a lot of it is just they want to believe that because it's more comforting for them. Do you think that that's the reason why you believe that, or do you think that you have other reasons also?
No, that's pretty much it. It's not a thing with me where I'm like scared of the idea of not. It's just I don't like that idea.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's no way. There's no overwhelming way to prove anything else. It's pretty working.
Okay.
So
Really?
I saw another hand go up.
Oh, beautiful woman in the jean jacket. Who's my mother?
So, but it sounds like I'm hearing the two of you, or at least Colin, say that maybe you can employ this philosophy in order for you to do things that are meaningful to you.
Yeah.
Anything else? Any other questions?
Yeah,
Yes.
so with determinism, I'm still on the fence. I've always been in the middle, just smack dab in the middle of determinism.
Well, not to worry. There actually is.
I know.
That's really confusing, and we're not going to get into that because it makes no sense.
Like, not on the fringe or anything. But the question I have about determinism, see, my thing is does my mind cause experiences, or do my experiences cause, like, is the mind experiencing causes, or is the mind causing experiences? Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So and so I'm just wondering, and I know we don't have a lot of time. I see you looking at you.
No, absolutely.
But this is something this is something I think about, where do we lie there? And that's why I kind of lean a little bit more towards determinism sometimes. Personally, I don't like people telling me what to do, so I prefer libertarianism. But so that's it's like this conundrum I live.
Okay, super fast. I'm going to answer that question.
We're
kind
really
of.
doing fine on time.
Oh,
Okay.
great.
Gave
So,
you guys like 10 minutes of discussion, you're at about 5 minutes.
so
Okay.
your mind interprets signals that it gets from things. Say, I touch this, and it feels the pressure of the wood on my finger, and my mind interprets that in its own way. If you touch the wood, you might feel a completely different thing than I do.
There's no way of knowing because everyone's structured differently.
So what do you two think? Do you think that the mind causes experiences or the mind experiences causes?
I'd say they're both, depending on the circumstances.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
I think we sort of cause our experiences from input.
Yes.
I was gonna say, therefore, then, with compartmentalism, that's like the in-between. So wouldn't things like outside influences, whether it be a place or culture you're born into, or previous decisions you've made with your free will, affect the way things move forward? As far as your own free will or the next thing that happens, whether it is, are you practicing free will or are you building layers upon your previous decisions or previous moves or previous motives, or maybe you were born in a third world country and you don't have the experience that maybe somebody born in Columbus, Ohio has, or the same influences.
So there's a way of looking at the mind where you look at it as a function of sorts. You get a certain input and it's very complicated, but that function determines the output. But also the input affects the function for future reference. So your experience is what you take in results in how you react to that and further changes how you react to similar situations in the future. That's a way to look at it, right? That is an argument for determinism.
Right. That's what's scientifically proven.
That's what I'm saying.
Like, so you can agree that determinism is what's scientific.
Well, then I guess the quantum indeterminability, whatever that word is, could say that what I just said is incorrect. Maybe not. You don't know.
That is the wonderful thing about this is that there's so many possibilities. It's so murky. There's no absolute. We can argue. We can debate this so long, and it's and anybody can have a range of
Literally thousands of years.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Think about
Because it's not a scientific fact.
Right,
It's
exactly.
a way of looking at it.
Now, I love you talking and debating.
I'm playing you
We
off
have
the
other
stage.
people-
Good job, everybody.
I just like to point out that the questions that were raised are questions hardly debated in philosophy.
Yeah.
all the time.
Yes, as Anand was suggesting, I actually wanted to comment on this too. So we covered a lot of material this week, and really we only spent the first day talking about this kind of libertarian and kind of compatibilist determinist notions of free will. It's very interesting, I think, as Anand was drawing our attention to, that what naturally comes up in conversations like these are a bunch of positions that have been heavily explored in philosophy, including this idea that maybe you kind of have to believe in free will, even if it's not necessarily true. There's this kind of psychological, practical necessity to believing in free will, in particular with this view defended by a philosopher named William James, which is an interesting argument. It doesn't really matter if determinism is true. I somehow must live as though it isn't. So that there's deep lineage behind all of these ideas. Okay, anyways, I don't want to take over. So I'm going to take just a couple of moments to note a few things about what happened in that conversation. So one of the things we try to do in philosophy is kind of mix it up with who we're hearing from. So sometimes this week we had like very contemporary people from our department who are currently publishing on some of their work, presenting brand new ideas. And sometimes we are pulling on very old ideas, things like Plato, which are now more than 2,000 years old. And it's always interesting when we do that because, the original context of Plato's cave is very late, right? So he is actually talking about things like the forms and the limits of our perception, and the sun turns out to be God, and so this idea of like an ultimate enlightenment in Plato's version does seem to be actually quite important. That philosophy leads you to this this perception of the divine, was Plato's actual view. But there's all this kind of embedded stuff about education and biases that we can talk about. We did a couple of readings this week about possible ways of thinking about the cave as racism or ignorance, or right. So the power of an image like that is that it can be used kind of stretched beyond its original purpose. And that's one of the things we try to do in philosophy, is do both of those things, like help students understand what is the original philosopher trying to do, but then also what are other ways we can kind of expand out to our contemporary experiences. So, all right, we love philosophy here in the philosophy department, and your campers do very well with it. We also do recognize that we are embodied beings who can't just sit and listen to philosophy all the time. So we're going to take like a 10-minute break. All right, welcome back. Here we go.
Okay. So can you live a good life in the experience machine?
First of all, what is the experience machine? The experience machine is a hypothetical invention created by Robert Nozick in his book Anarchy, State, and Utopia. The experience machine is a machine that you can plug yourself into and give you a full simulation of reality. The only difference is that you are guaranteed to be happier than you would be otherwise, and that you are the only person plugged in. Everyone else you see or interact with is not you.
Okay, why does this matter? It's like not real, it's just an idea someone created. So it brings up many ethical and philosophical questions that are that are not only interesting but important to talk about. So the one that we'll be focusing specifically today, main question, is whether you can have a good quality of life when plugged into that machine, and what makes your life good if it's all simulated. And yeah, that's what we're considering in our presentation. So what does it mean to have a good life? Basically, okay, if it's possible to have a good life, okay, we have to define what good life is to talk about if you can have a good life in a simulated experience. So this question has been debated a lot among philosophers, many philosophers for a long time, because everybody wants to have a good life. Generally, it's boiling down to two different answers: hedonism and objective list theory. Hedonism is the idea that only happiness is required to live a good life. Objective list theory is the idea that there is an objective list of goals you have to meet to live a good life beyond just happiness.
So first, we're going to talk about hedonism. If this is your preferred philosophy, under hedonism, you just need to be happy to live a good life in hedonism. You just need to be happy. So in the experience machine, you are happier. It's part of the hypothetical that you're guaranteed to be a little bit happier. Under hedonism, you're perfectly happy. You don't have any other goals than that. Of course, maybe if it's subjective that you have other things to make happy, okay. But according to someone like Jeremy Bentham, you would be perfectly happy, and your life would be going well. Now, according to objective list theory, it's a little bit more complicated. An objective list theory is not just about happiness, but you might need things like friendship, achievement, knowledge, etc., etc. And the question comes down to, can you actually achieve those things in a simulated reality? Is it real? Like, can you have friends? Can you achieve things when everything is fake? Just because you are happy doesn't mean you are living a fulfilled life under objective list theory. It is pretty heavily debated, though, because in this theory, you could say, sure, you are achieving friendship, knowledge, and achievement, but it's fake, I suppose, but you're still achieving. So you could argue that you are living a good life, or you could say that you aren't living a good life. It's not exactly clear which one. Questions?
So do you know that you're in a simulation when you're in the experience machine?
So
the idea is that no, you don't. In the original sorry to cut you off.
You're
In the original idea, it was that the original idea by the guy who created it is that every 2 years you would wake up and you have some time to decide what the next 2 years of your life would be. But then when you went back into the experience, you wouldn't know. But either way, what like the original guy said and what people are taking it to mean today, either way, you wouldn't know, you wouldn't be aware of what you were.
So then it would be impossible to live a bad life because you're guaranteed to be happier and you can kind of choose what's going to happen. And so
in a hedonist perspective, yes, you are happy, thus you are living a good life. But in the if you believe in objective bliss theory, it's pretty complicated, but part of it is generally accepted to be human connection and being friends with other people. So a problem arises because you're not actually like making any connections and with achievement. You aren't achieving anything. You're in a simulation. Nothing's changing. You aren't affecting the world at all.
but you would think you are.
Yeah,
But that doesn't mean you are.
yeah, it sort of comes down to that. It's sort of a question, if you think that you're achieving those things, if you think that you have friends, does it really matter? I mean, these are questions that you could ask. We don't have, these are questions that people have debated, but there's not really an answer.
So, there's no way to know that we or one of us is in experience, right? So according to objective bliss theory, is it then questionable that any of our actions that we have a life?
So that's, I believe it's called solipsism, where you believe you're the only actual being in reality, and it's generally accepted that you can't prove you're the only person, you can't disprove it. So if you're asking if your actions actually have any worth and any guarantee, the generally accepted idea is to act as if you are guaranteed that there is action, because there's no consequence if you don't, and there is a consequence if you do act like there is no action.
So could we just apply that to the experience machine?
You could, but the question is more with the experience machine isn't if your actions are good, it's if you're living a fulfilling and good life. Like with objective bliss theory, if you're meeting all those goals that an objective bliss theorist would.
But any one of us could be not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if there's an outside observer, they would be saying, okay, is he living a good life? That's what the question is.
Would you guys be on the experience machine?
I would personally, but that's more because I would willingly go in the experience machine. I'm not a big fan of the whole ignorance is listening personally, not my jam, but anyone else, do you have input on that question?
I think as of right now, like if I had the choice to go with the experience machine tomorrow, I don't think I would do that. But I do think if there were like other options, like if way far in the future, I was like, I don't know, 70, then yeah, like be older, I want to go. Or if I was able to make decisions before I was actually born, and I was born into the experience machine with a guaranteed better life. Yeah, I would. The point of it is that you'd be happier, and if that's true, then yeah.
I'm gonna get Owen's question first, and then we can come back to your thoughts.
Okay, so as we have a room full of parents, this might be a pertinent way to build on Haley's question. So oftentimes when people become parents, they say, I want my child to flourish, I want my child to live a happy life. So if you were in the position of a parent and you were given this guarantee that if you plug your child into the experience machine, they're going to be happier than they otherwise would be, do you think that it is a moral duty on behalf of the parent to put their children in the experience machine to give them a happier life?
So it's a very complicated question. Of course. I personally would say that you should wait until your child is old enough to make that decision for themselves. And then if they choose that they want to go into the experience machine, you should respect that decision and let them go into the experience machine. Because it isn't really your choice. You shouldn't force them either direction. And when they can't make a decision, you shouldn't put your decision on.
I agree. I think that big decisions like that, like whole, do you want your life to be real or fake? I think that is not the kind of decision that you can make for someone else. It's even if it's your child or like otherwise, I think that's a decision that you have to make for yourself.
Yeah.
I agree with both of them. I think you should do that until you put some choices. Your kids might want the ability to have meaningful relationships. Even if they didn't know they were in the experience with you, that might be such
Is this a build on question?
Brief follow-up, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because philosophy is fun.
Yeah.
So the reasoning that you've offered there is that these are huge life-altering decisions that you shouldn't make on behalf of your child. That's not the right thing to do. But it seems like in the everyday practice of raising children, parents do in fact make huge life-altering decisions on behalf of their children, in fact quite routinely. And the decisions parents make in, say, how they raise a child, where they send them to school, how they raise them religiously, all these things have huge impacts. So what is the significant asymmetry that you see between these everyday cases and the experience machine cases?
Well, I think the main difference is depending on what decisions you're talking about that the parent might make. The experience machine is something that you can sort of change your mind about. It's not like an irreversible decision, like to not put your child in the experience machine. Like they could always decide later that they wanted to go into the experience machine, and it would probably be basically the same as it would have been if they were put in it as a child. As for decisions that that would be, they could choose later and it wouldn't be that different. But it's sort of like, if your parents choose decisions for you, it's not something that, a lot of those big decisions are not something that you can sort of hold off on deciding about. They have to be made like now, they can't be made later. If you don't make a decision, it's like still making a decision.
I also think that it is true that parents constantly are making like altering kids and how they're going to grow, what kind of person they're going to be. But I think that if a child is put into the experience immediately, like right after birth, in order to have a happier life, they would still have simulated parents in that in a simulated life. So it's the same concept, just one is not what we consider reality.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mentioned they two experience with their children, or if they were going through their sense like they didn't know anything else. Would you then, since you said that you already would go in and help kids, would you give your parents permission to put you in the machine, or would you like time travel back? I would give my parents permission if I wasn't born yet and I was like, I don't know, God, and I could tell them what maybe the experience when I'm born. But like right now, no, because I'm already living my life and I'm having these experiences now that I am generally happy with. So I think I would only want to be close to the experience if I didn't already start having experiences in my life.
Yeah. So the thing with the experience machine is, of course, you don't know that you're in the experience machine. Even if I was 50 years old and then I got plugged in, I wouldn't know about those last 50 years in a sense. So I would say that putting someone into the machine, you should just wait because it's not going to harm someone if you do it later. But putting them in really early and then having to take them out, that can be traumatizing. Realizing, oh, everything's alive. Everything I just lived was alive. So you're probably going to want to wait so that it's not traumatized. Like you want to wait till it's not going to affect the whole rest of your life.
Yeah, even though I would want to be put in the experience machine, I wouldn't go back and give my parents permission to put me in the experience machine. I think that's something that you have to decide for yourself. And I don't think that even it doesn't really matter on some level if the child would grow up to want to be put in the experience machine. It's just not the parent's decision at all.
I saw your hand first.
Two more.
So a follow-up, I guess, to both Kaylee and Owen's questions. Do you think that if this were a real life situation, a child might hold regrets towards, or regrets is not the proper word, but a sort of bad feeling towards their parents if they lived a traumatizing life due to their parents not putting them into the experience machine?
Well, at that point, through my reasoning, I would say no, because you could just plug yourself into the experience machine at that point.
And then you forget.
Yeah,
all
you just
of
forget
that.
all that. So, if they then say like, well, I don't want to go to the experience machine, okay, then yeah, but if it's the issue of I wish I was in the experience machine, you could just plug yourself in later.
Yeah, I think if you're like an adult and you're regretting the fact or like lamenting the fact that your parents didn't put you in the experience machine, like I think if you're blaming your parents for that, like, I'm sorry to say, but that's kind of your fault. Like it's like not that it's your fault, but it's not their fault, and if you shouldn't be blaming them for your like decision. You shouldn't blame them for that.
So one final question. So you guys seem to be okay, at least with like choosing to go to the experience machine, like your kid choosing to do that, or you choosing to do that.
Yeah.
But do you not think then that knowledge is an important part of life, education in the broad sense that later?
So I would, because I would never put myself in the experience machine, I would agree with you. I wouldn't want to purposely find myself in that sense. But it's like if someone wants to do that for themselves, it's like they're still living a life, I suppose. Like I mean, I can't really say. I would restrict someone else, but if someone like, I would talk to one of them.
Yeah, let me talk to you because I
Yeah.
would be okay with it. So that's not, so that does not actually really matter to me. Like, I think that, I mean, knowledge is like good or whatever, but you can still learn in the experience machine. And I think that talking about reality, like it'd be real to them or it'd be real to me in that situation. And I don't think it really matters all that much if it's like actually real. Like, I don't think it really matters.
So last question.
All right.
All right, last one. Here we go.
My name is Richard. My presentation is on Confucianism and Taoism. So the question that we're trying to answer here is: does ritual enhance or restrict your flourishing?
Just ignore that.
Okay. So on the left side here we have Confucianism, and it is talking about Confucianism is the side that bases on the importance of life for rituals. And then also talks about like the purpose of rituals and like why they do rituals and rituals enable freedom. So an example of ritual that we can do today is we teach children today to say please and thank you. And from a Confucianist point of view, you are becoming more virtuous when you are doing these rituals and like teaching your kids to like say please when they want something and thank you when they receive something. As people become more virtuous, they become more free to act under the Confucianism point of view. So as you're older in life and you get more virtuous in life, then you'll be able to be directly more free as a result of practicing rituals. Another way of thinking about it, going more towards the Taoism side, is that when people ask pro athletes like star football players, basketball players, golfers, whatever, when they made like a great shot or a big play, and they ask like, how did you do that? Most athletes can't tell you like, oh, well, I planted my feet, and then I waited for the snap, and then I grabbed the ball, and I knew it was going. Most of them just they have it in a sense that it's just there, and they go with it. So as they go with the flow, and that's what wu wei means. It means more like you go with the flow and like kind of let life take you within that direction. So when athletes they don't have a direct answer to those questions, and they believe more like within practice. So like when you do practice, you become more of a natural at what you're doing, and you don't have to think about it too much. what this analogy, weak water, strong river, is weak water means that, like if I pour water in my hand, the water's not really going to do anything. But, and it's like, it's a small amount, it's nothing really. It's going to fall into the river. With strong river is going to do is as the river's moving along the valley, it's going to erode the area and change the area to like how it is. So it's going with the flow and it's going to, erode away the Grand Canyon or erode away a rock or a big rock. Another thing that the Taoists really believe is to mold yourself to the world. Don't let the world mold. Mold yourself to the world. Don't mold the world to yourself. So within that saying is you can think of it as within pipings and plumbing is that you try to mold water. In people who've done plumbing or piping in their house know that it's a real mess, and the water can sometimes get everywhere. So that you kind of just want to like go with the flow because it'll be a lot easier to soon achieve your goals within that way. So the question we can do is like, how do these two sides promote flourishing? Well, no one particular side, they can each achieve flourishing in their own way, but just saying one side does and one side doesn't isn't an answer to this question for both sides for promote flourishing. So rituals, for instance, they can provide the flourishing for a certain kind of people who believe in those rituals. And but for other people, those rituals can produce stress and anxiety. If you're working every day and you have to perform this ritual every day, meaning just in your day-to-day life, going to work, working from 9 to 5, and really, having no meaning within your life, working so much that you are killing yourself with the too much stress and anxiety, which is kind of what today's world is built around. It can be more harmful to people. But on the flip side, it can give people a sense of happiness. It can give people a sense of they won't feel lost. They have a sense, they know what their life is and they know what they're doing. But then with Taoism, just the fact that you're just going free within life, some people find that as you can be lost or you don't know where you're supposed to go. You need something to help you improve to flourish. So it's like for particular people, Taoism would be better as like you kind of want to build it yourself, but if you don't really know what you want to do, Confucianism will help with that. So the solution for that could be is that you could pick parts of the side. So for instance, we use rituals to tell children that you say please and thank you, so they get more virtue in life and it helps them. But you don't strain those rituals so much that this person's going to be having so much stress and anxiety from working their day and not being able to live anymore because they're so stressed and out that they don't have any accomplishment anymore. On the other side, if you just let people be free and do whatever you want, you're gonna get chaos. You're gonna get people who are lost in life and they don't know what to do and they need some sense of order to kind of like help them, guide them on a path. And like for like education, it's a sense of order. You go to school every day to learn, helps you guide you on a path of where you want to go within that. So you kind of like pick which ones kind of are best for you, and then like kind of guide yourself within them. So yeah.
Do you think a sense of balance can be achieved between Confucianism and Taoism?
Yeah, I think so. It kind of depends on what context you use it, because like you need some ritual as for school, for instance, to go to school every day. And then there's other rituals that you can choose to be a part of or not be a part of, like if you want to go to a parade or if you want to celebrate this kind of day. And some rituals we do is to help people. Like if a family member dies, a ritual can be used to help people, as you dress all black, you respect the person at the funeral, and then it helps people like cope with reality in that sense. So you can kind of pick and choose like which ones help you and which ones church isn't for me. I don't even go to church every Sunday.
So sometimes when these two different views are discussed, they're presented as kind of complete opposites. The Confucians are all about being rigid rituals, and the Taoists just kind of go with the flow freely. And to the extent that one of the Taoist answers openly mocking how dumb the Confucians were, right? But do you think that given that one side is practicing and emphasizing rituals, and the other side is emphasizing practices. Do you think there's a significant amount of common ground between the two views that could sometimes be overlooked?
Yeah, well, you can think of it, or for me personally, I learned about this yesterday, so I'm still very new to this. But within this is that I see like Taoism as like within your practice. So if you practice, you're playing football every day. You can kind of also see it as a ritual, that like you're using it as a ritual or a tradition, to go out every day on the field and practice and practice and practice to kind of achieve your goals. So to me, I kind of see it very correlates into one, but I mean at the same time, it's that. Yeah, you can kind of build off of, whatever works for you. Right? But you can be really strict in Confucianism, or you can be really strict in the Taoism. But I mean, either one, it just kind of depends on like how you think about it and how you philosophize with it. I'll see more questions. Thank you.
All right. We don't have one more group. We're going to end a little bit early, but I want to take a few minutes just to say a couple things about why we do this and where we're going to go here. And then we have some certificates and things to hand out, and then we'll let you go your merry way. So one thing you might have noticed, some of you clearly have philosophical experience in your background, but not necessarily all of you do. So I want to give a little apology for and by that I mean like a little defense of a little case for philosophy. So one thing you might have noticed is in basically every single presentation that happened today, the campers are sketching out a 2 or 3 different views. It's pretty common in philosophy, right? And then you're like, well, which one do you agree with? And there's never a convergence, right? Like even in our groups, like I believe this. I would never go with the experience machine. I would definitely go with the experience machine. I would go with the experience machine under certain conditions, right? Like this just always happens in philosophy, and so you might think, what are you even doing if you never come up with any answers? If you're still talking about the same thing for thousands of years. And when I teach philosophy classes, intro philosophy classes, sometimes I like to talk about progress in philosophy, unlike other disciplines, right? So if you go over to the physics department and you ask them, is the Earth a sphere or a flat disk, right? They're going to say, oh, it's a sphere. Here's all the reasons why we know that, right? Go talk to our climate scientists. Is the world getting warmer? Yes, it is. And here's how we know, right? Here's the ice cores we drilled and put in this freezer. We have a giant freezer full of ice cores on campus. And we can tell. We're watching the glaciers. So that's what happens in a lot of these sciences. We get this convergence of opinion, right? But not in philosophy. We don't get this convergence of opinion. So what are we up to? Here's what happens, and why I think philosophy is interesting and important. So very, very quickly, as philosophers take to a discipline and start asking questions, 2 or 3 traditions will emerge, and then they'll kind of talk to each other for thousands of years, right? But philosophical progress doesn't look like convergence, it looks like depth, right? And not just depth in your own tradition, but being able to understand other traditions right next to you, right? So maybe you're a libertarian, and maybe you're a compatibilist, maybe you're a determinist. But as you start to understand your own view better and better, you're interacting with these other views, and you get to understand those views better and better as well. So there's this kind of collaborative depth that we achieve. And just to get very slightly political for the moment, and very broadly political, this is something that we are very bad at, right? As a whole society, not pointing any fingers at any one group, because every one of us is bad at this, right? Dividing into groups, pointing at the other ones, and yelling. And not a lot of this collaborative, like how can we help each other understand each other better and go deeper in our own understanding. And I think this is one of the places where philosophy really does have practical social importance, right? It's helping us learn how to truly disagree in ways that are productive. And this is something we definitely saw over the course of the week, right, with your campers, right? A little earlier on, it's a little more kind of what you would expect in a kind of American conversational context. A little bit more of like, yeah, well, that view is dumb because of this. And over time, as you start to do this, you kind of start to learn how to disagree a bit more respectfully, a bit more constructively. And even over the course of a week, we saw that kind of work happen in your students. So thank you for giving us this time with them. We value it. The plan is that we're going to continue to do this camp every year, as you probably remember. There were 5 slots, because you can come in as a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, or a recently graduated senior, so in between your high school and freshman year of college, you can come. So I think what we're going to try to do is put together 5 of these big topics, 5 or more, and then cycle through them. So next year's camp will be totally different. And so if you did enjoy this and you would like to come back again next year, we already have your email address, so you're going to find out about it no matter what. But we would love to have you back. And we're going to be sending out a couple of surveys. I think we're going to do a camper survey and a parent survey so that we can learn from you. This whole idea was started by a colleague of mine who since moved to another institution, but because of the pandemic, we kind of lost a lot of the institutional knowledge that we're rebuilding. So this is very much a learning experience for us. We genuinely do want your feedback, even if that is negative, so that we can do a better job moving forward. We're running another camp next week, then we're going to do one online, and we're definitely going to keep doing them over the next few years. So we genuinely do really appreciate your input, even if you're like, this was the worst thing ever, that would be helpful to us. And obviously that's not what we want to hear, but if that's what needs to be heard, then we will hear it. We're good at being critiqued. If philosophers know one thing, it's that we're never right. So yes, anything you want to chat about? Great. Do you want to do the festivities? Awesome. We'll have a little graduation ritual, very Confucian.
And again, thank you all so much. This has been a wonderful week. It was a great first week of camp, and hopefully I see some of you in future years. So a round of applause for you.